Okay, so my name is Shanu. I'm a developer at ThoughtWorks. So unlike the previous two sessions, I'm not going to talk about anything like new technology or a fancy tool. Just going back to the basics.
Old is gold.
Old is gold, yes. Like it was funny when you explained, you know, we used to bring the data and then do the computation. Now there is a paradigm shift where you're sending the instructions or functions back to the data, right? Data locality and other things. There was one project which I worked on where it's an Oracle database and everything is in stored procedure, right? And you just call the stored procedure, get the data, and then show it. This is like a legacy system. We call legacy system, right?
This is my daily job.
So I wonder, are we going back to that?
That's most
age?
of the IT people's daily job.
But I think over the journey we have kind of refined, the thought process or the mechanics in which things happen. Anyways, back to the topic. It's unit testing goodness. Just show of hands, how many of you are developers? I guess everyone would be developers. Okay. How many of you write unit tests? Perfect. Okay, this this might be helpful. This session might be helpful for you. Cool. So what this session is not going to be about is, I'm not going to talk about TDD. I'm not going to talk about what is unit testing. I see a lot of people talking about, at least show that and that they have done unit testing. But I can just very quickly say what unit testing is. And I'm not going to talk about why you should write unit testing, right? You showed up hand, right? You said you write unit testing. Can you just explain? Just help me. Like, why do you want to write unit testing?
So the reason we write unit tests is to make sure that our code works as to specification. So make sure that it's not doing something other than what it's supposed to be doing, as well as we are trying to cover whatever we can in terms of exceptions that might occur, bad situations, bad input, those kind of things.
Thank you, sir. I just want to ask another question, right? How many of you feel that unit test is not important or it shouldn't be written by a developer? No, that's great. Okay, how many of you feel that unit testing is actually painful? I have felt it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I would ask which part is actually painful next, right? So, how many of you are familiar with Agile? Okay, so this is from Agile Manifesto, which says working software over comprehensive documentation, right? We used to write code, we used to develop softwares with a lot of documentation, right? Waterfall, where emphasis was more on documentation than coding at that time. But Agile says working software over comprehensive documentation, not saying you shouldn't document, right? So the question, people who have come from waterfall methodology coming to Agile, I have done both. I have worked in a waterfallish company in projects, and I'm working in ThoughtWorks, so we do Agile projects. So I used to think about where is this documentation going, right? Because software is not, we are not developing software for ourselves, right? There is some other group of people who are going to maintain this software. So over the time I learned that more than documentation, it's actually code that helps, right? You will not read a manual and then come to the software. You directly want to get into the code, right? So one of the important aspects of unit test, which I believe, is it actually helps document your code, right? So what that means is that is as important as you write the code as well, right? So with that note, I'm just going to talk about what is unit testing, right? So you have a code that you intend to write, or you have written, right? In TDD, you write the test first and then you write the implementation, right? So there's a logic that you want to implement, right? Let's say some of two numbers, right? Or a calculator, or an object which has some state in it, and you want to execute some action or some method on it, right? So the first step you do is you prepare, right? You set up the data. and then you execute it, you get back a result, and you make sure that that result is what I expected, right? So these three are the fundamental phases in your unit test, right? Everyone clear? Now, there were some people who said that there is a bit more, it's a painful to write unit tests, right? With, like, I guess you showed up the hand, right? Can you tell me which part in this is the most painful part in unit testing?
Setup.
Yeah. Setup takes a lot of time, right? You write a lot of code to set up. You look at the code, it might take like 5 or 10 minutes. You look at the code, you're like, oh my god, I set up all these just to execute one line of code, right? So actually, my talk is on focusing on the setup, right? How this is something that we have learned in projects. Some of the techniques that we have used, which might be useful for you to adopt in your projects as well. Couple of things I'm focusing on. So how many people do Java? .NET C? Okay, quite a lot. So I'm talking about static languages especially because that is one language where you have to write a lot of code, right, to get things done. Unfortunately, I'm using Java to give examples. And the slides would have a lot of code. So if you're interested to see what is happening inside the code, just come over. I'm not sure the code will be visible to the people out there. Okay, to explain, I have a very simple scenario. I guess everyone knows what is e-commerce, right? Everyone has at least bought something from e-commerce, right? So you see a lot of items there. I'm just saying, I'm just creating a scenario where I have a lot of items in my e-commerce, and you can basically put the items that you would like to buy into the cart with the quantity that you would like to buy, and like Amazon, right? All the items are not supplied by Amazon, right? You would have suppliers who are supplying that items to you, right? And I'm just having one scenario which is if I order more than one item from a supplier, I get a discount. Let's say this is my business scenario, right? Now you start writing code for it, and I'm using Java, so I'm going back to object-oriented programming. I identify the classes, right? I would have a cart, I would have an item order, the order that represents this is the item and the quantity, an item, of course, and a supplier, right? Now let's go back to the goodness of unit testing, right? The first level is, yeah, you have decided to write unit test, right? That itself is a good part. Now let's take this unit test, right? Is it visible? I'm sorry, I can't increase the font. If I increase the font, it will go up. Right? So we are consultants, right? So we get into projects where we get into a consulting kind of gigs as well. We have to go and look at the code of people who have written. So more often I've seen this kind of unit test, right? Can you figure out what this unit test is saying? If we go back to the agile way of developing software, where your code is your document, right? It's pretty hard, right? Even though Java is a verbose language, it's not very easy to get the idea what this test is doing, right? There are a couple of things that can go right here, right? And that's a goodness level that I want to talk about. Okay, so this is the reaction that you might get. So the next level is you make it a bit more descriptive, right? That what you are trying to achieve in your test, right? It's like a statement that you're trying to make it in as a method. And if you see the previous example, right? This is nothing but you have an item order which has an item and a quantity, right? And look, if a new person is looking at it, there are certain things which would puzzle that person, right? Like what is this 1? What is this 3.0, right? What is this ABCXYZ, right? You have to go to the code, do command P or any other commands to find out what that parameter actually means, or you have to go into the classes to find out what exactly that means, right? And the first test is basically computing the total, right? In my card, I have two items. One item is of quantity 1, the second item is of quantity 2, right? And the result is the total, right? The simple math. Right? Now, if I look at this, right, for this to execute, I don't worry about supplier, right? I'm just worried about the item, the quantity, and I'm just worried about what is the price, right? So one way you could do that is by having setter method, right? So the next level you can think of, okay, I can have an item order. I put in set item method, set quantity in that, right? You could do it, but what's the problem with this approach?
Setters should be avoided.
Why should setter be avoided?
We generally don't try to keep setters.
Huh? Sorry?
Java supports propaganda as mutation, so setters promote mutation, so why not have setters? That's what it is.
So maybe in this case, we are writing a function to test our application.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. Well, let me go back to mutable and immutable data structures, right? People who have done functional programming, they rave about mutable structures, right? Or do they not?
Immutable.
Immutable and immutable. Yeah. What's the idea behind immutable data structure?
Once it's created, you can't change it.
Okay. So, what's the benefit we get out of it?
Since that
Yeah.
value never changes, you can be sure that anywhere down in the code that you accessing that value, it has not changed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's easy to, like you said, reason about the flow of data in your application.
Yeah. So if you go back to the object-oriented principle, right? You have an object which represents a state, right? And you are letting that object to change the state, right? And this is just for testing, right? It's just for testing, right? You don't even need a set method in your whole application, right? Where let's take for example, if you have a web-based application where your data is in database and you have a Hibernate layer which can create your model. Your item is a model here, and it can be translated back all the way down to your web page. You wouldn't even need a set method. The set method is introduced just for testing, right? I mean, have you come across those kind of scenarios where you introduce some method just for testing? I mean, mostly it will be set method. We can see a lot of code bases where set method would be introduced just for testing.
And sometimes the scope will increase. From private, we will make it as public.
Exactly. Yeah, that actually violates the total encapsulation process, right? Okay, so this is not good, right? Like you don't want to introduce set methods and change the state because you are introducing the set method here that is available for the application code as well. So moving on to the next level of goodness, right? One default solution for this is builders, right? You create a builder which has the same attributes your target object also has, right? And you would have these methods, right? For example, item order, it has these attributes, item, supplier, and quantity. You would have methods with item, with supplier, right? And there will be a build method as well, right? So with this, your test becomes a bit neat, right? You get a builder, right? You get something like with methods, right? And you create build, and there you have an object of item for you, right? And your code, your test can be written in such a way that it's all done with builders, And all your objects can be created with builders. Right? How many of you use builders? Okay. Now, what's the pain area of using builders?
Keeping
You have to have all the properties.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So, one of the previous projects, we also had a similar situation, right? Where we had a lot of builders and we need to build. And what we looked at was, okay, there's a pattern, right? We just copy and paste these data setups, right? Maybe you would want to use one object, like for example, let's say in this case, let's say iPhone, right? You can create iPhone as your base case that every developer understands what iPhone is, right? It's an item, right? With the moment he sees that it's an iPhone, he knows that it's an item, right? So you could create those kind of objects throughout your code to build your data setup for your unit testing, right? So, and how can we, get one of the main reason that I don't, one of the main reason that I have to use builder to set my values is because I don't want to expose the set method and I don't have access to my object as well, right? So one of the approach that we kind of took was something like a mother class. We just called it mother. So what this utility class would do is, it takes a class, right, and you can inject your attributes dynamically, right? It uses reflection, right? I'm not giving the implementation here; it's very trivial, right? It uses reflection. So you can put a with method here, which takes strings as a property name and any object as the value, right? And keeps it in a hash, and it builds. When it says build, it will build an object for you setting all the properties, right? So, and the implementation is nothing but reflection, right? It uses a reflection to set the field. Now, people can argue that reflection is bad, right? Reflection is bad in your application code, right? Reflection is not bad if you are using a test, which is not running in production, right? It's a test that will run to validate your code, right?
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
So we can just leave off some properties in that object, or we have to have all the properties just like how we go with the builder?
You can leave out your properties
Okay.
because it's setting the values, right? Inside, it's not a constructor, right? So what that means is your item. Let's say, for example, you have an item with 3 attributes, right? You can choose to have a constructor, right? Or you can choose to have a set. The best way is you don't need both of those. If you have a method like this will inject the values for you, right? So in a typical code base, right, especially web based, you would have layers. You would have control layer, then you would have service layer, then you have models, right? So in our previous project, we had models which didn't have any constructors, any setter methods, right? And it becomes that means that it is very, very encapsulated, right? Nobody is going to change. You are not giving tools for anyone to go and change this. Okay, with this, this builder is just creating the objects for you, right? What you could also do is bring out factories, right? As I said, have you heard about personas? Right? It's a word that usually being used in a QA world or testing world. So, for example, if you are in a ERP, right, or any of the bigger enterprise applications, you would have typical use cases, like for example, an item that is being sold on a sale, an item that is sold by a vendor who gives 10%, right? So these are scenarios that you can qualify to be personas, right? Like it is something that will be there in your system, and anyone can recognize it, right? For example, iPhone. When I say iPhone in e-commerce context, you know that it's an item, right? So you could create factories on top of your the builders, which is the mother class here, which you can create these kind of factory objects, factory methods, right? So you can have iPhone, you can have in a Samsung Galaxy, and the moment you see these things in the code, you know that it's an item, right? So with this item, with these factories, I can create item order factory, which in turn use item factory, right? And I build up my previous test, which was in the level 1, to this level, right? Which is a bit self-explanatory, right? I have an iPhone item order, Samsung item order, right? I don't have any other noise, right? All the noise is being abstracted out, right? And this can be very well be used in other testing, scenarios as well. So this was the first test that gets translated to this. And if you use the similar factories, you could change the very first test that I was showing you, which is this one. This scenario is nothing but given there is a supplier, if you order more than 2 items from that supplier, you get a discount. Okay? That's the logic that you want to test here. That unit test you get translated to this. So one couple of things that I've seen which would be helpful in your test is you just name your variables better, right? And try to give real examples in your code, right? For example, I'm saying Apple and Amazon. Everyone knows Apple and Amazon, right? So whatever is relevant in your domain, give the right name for your variables, right? That would help someone to just read the code and understand what you're intending to do. And also the figures, right? I'm not cooking up things like say 10 rupees or 5 rupees. I'm just giving some realistic numbers, right? That can help me test some real scenarios, right? Alright, so there might be cases where you want to do an integration test as well, right? Where you want to persist the data in your database, right? And then get the data back. Let's say if you're in a hibernate world, right? You would want to persist some data, like your entities, you want to persist it, and then you want to do some DA operations, right? And you would test the DA operation. So again, the setup would be like you want to insert the data, or you want to persist your model, and then do a DA operations and verify it. So the other class that I was talking about, that could be used with session as well, right? You can have an overloaded method which takes in a session, right? And you can create or insert the data into the database using the session, right? So all the data objects that are created for your test, everything comes from factory, right? So if you keep everything in factory, what you can do is you can just ship it, right? How many of your project does functional testing? Functional testing. Okay, so your QAs also would be doing the same thing, right? They also would have to set up the item. They also would have to set up, which you already would have solved. So why not reuse it, right? You can ship it. You can solve the jar file. You can create a jar file, use it in integration test, use it in functional test. Everyone speaks one language now, right? While you're setting up the data, and that's the last level of goodness we have reached. I'm hoping that you would have better implementations or innovations going forward. With that, I end my little talk. I'll take up any questions if you have.
What is your opinion on using mocking libraries? Take it easy, mock and
So there are cases where you would want to mock it, right? Like, I mean, most of the cases you would. For example, if you are having a DAO call.
UI code, data access code.
Yeah.
I don't want to call the database to insert.
Exactly. So, and there are cases where you want actual object tree. Like, for example, if you're doing a computation, right? And it is not having any data access, right? So let me give you an example here, right? If I have an item order which has item, right? I could very well create a mock of item and put it in my item order. And I tell item to give the price, do a when on that mock and return the price. But that is a bit more lengthy process, right? Rather than me, if I have a factory which can just create an item for me, it's just one line call. Rather than me saying this mock should do this, right? So if it is interaction between objects, right? And if you are having a better way of creating objects, setting up the objects, I would choose to do that, right? Whereas if I have a data access calls, right, database access call, and I'm expecting something from a different layer in my 3-tier architecture, right? I wouldn't want to create that, right? I would like mock it and get the value. So it is needed. Essentially, mock is needed in your base if you're building layered architecture.
So normally that's what I do when we have a call inside of that, which is calling many different service endpoints. So we create a mock for the service. What I want to know is whether when I'm running my particular method, are the services being called? So basically a service A dot call must have happened, service B dot call must have happened, service C dot call. So you create like a fake for that for the services A, B and C.
Yeah.
And the input for the service method is generally a large object. For example, something that is from a very big form on the UI. I really don't need to fill that form, fill that request object which has around 20 properties. So what I would do is I create a fake for that. I stuff it into the call to the service, which is to a service because I don't really care about it. So when I call my method, the method is being called with a very big request object, which is basically useless, which I can't, which is a stub for a fake. And then I make sure that each service method is called, because what I am trying to test is not whether the request object is correct, because validation is in a separate method. Rather, I am trying to make sure that when I call this method, are these 3 service endpoints being called? So that is generally how I use mocks versus stubbed or fake.
Yeah, so what you are testing there is essentially not a business logic, right? Or it's just making sure that the methods are being called, right? And it's more of delegation of the responsibility that you want to test, right? And it's a very wonderful use case where you could use mock, right? These examples are all where you have to deal with domain objects, right? Where you have domain objects and you have composite domain objects, and you want to do computations with those domain objects, right? Aggregates, de-aggregates, etc. Right? Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Say you have a service and you have a request mapping URL given for it.
Okay.
You give that URL, you assume that the service comes inside to that particular
Yeah.
method. How can you unit test that particular situation that for this particular URI this method is called?
So say that again. Can I'll replay it for you.
Method.
I have a method and I have an endpoint associated to that method. Let's say controller method, right? I have a request mapping to it. Now I want to make sure that when I make that request, that is being called. Okay. So first of all, unit test is at the unit level, right? So what happens in that method, if you want to test it, that's more unit for me, right? Now a request coming in, and when that request comes, this should be called, is done by whom?
It would be at a framework level if you're using a framework.
Yeah. Right? What you could do is you can write an integration test. Like for example, so Spring, right? I'm just taking Spring as an example. If you're using Spring, you can write Spring integration test where it will boot up a server. It will listen to a random port, and you can fire a request, and you can test end-to-end journey. Right? One thing we should be a bit more careful about is what exactly are we testing, right? Are we testing the framework? You don't have to go and test Spring, right? Because that's already tested and that's why you're using it, right? So that's one of the pitfall that you would get into. But you should definitely do an end-to-end integration test. But if you ask me, should I test whether I did a request mapping, whether this method is getting called or not? I wouldn't do it because that means that I'm testing Spring, right?
But if they change the text URL or
Sorry?
they change the URL at the get off order or something, they change the string, we go wrong.
Yeah, so that's where you want an integration test, right? Where you want to spin up your application and you want to do an end-to-end testing, right? But if I want, like if there is a desire to test, if I give this URL whether this method is getting called or not, that becomes you're testing that your framework code itself. Or maybe I didn't understand your.
Okay, so in the controller method, I will say I will map the URL to the method.
Yes.
So if I mistakenly change that string of the URL,
Yeah.
so now the test would fail. So that endpoint will not actually work.
Correct. That's when you do an integration test, right? Where you have to do an integration test. But the basic working of given a URL mapping, that method gets called or not, is your Spring's responsibility, right?
Okay, I have one question.
Yes.
Basically, we go with integration test with a fail-safe plugin, not the surefire plugin like the unit test. Even though if integration test fails, the build will pass on, right? Is there a way that for this particular test case, we can go with surefire? If they change the endpoint URL or something, it should fire and stop the build. For rest of the cases, the integration test, it can go fail-safe. You get my question?
No.
No. Unit test cases,
Yeah.
they go with surefire plugin, Maven.
Okay.
If some test case fails, it will stop the build.
Okay.
But integration test generally, they go with fail-safe plugin for Maven.
Why?
Generally, that's the practice most of the places I have seen. If
It's
some
okay to fail integration tests.
then that's okay.
I'm asking, like, is it okay to fail integration? Then
For-
why do we need to write this?
Okay.
You put a lot of effort, right, for writing a test.
Generally, management sees the report of integration because so many systems are involved and they don't want to fail the integration test in some cases actually. Because some system might be down or something can made up. That's what I was just asking.
That becomes manager driven.
This is why I don't show test reports to managers.
But if you're writing tests, like with understanding the essence of what test can give it to you, then you wouldn't have to worry about doing the report.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you are suggesting the factory pattern and builder pattern, right?
Yeah.
So this is in developer code it should be followed, or only for unit tests we should do this activity?
So there are cases where you want to have builders, right? Even in your application code. So there are two things that I've showed you, right? One is the builder itself, and other is something which we call it mother, where it is using reflection to set it. That you shouldn't use it in your application code, because that uses reflection to set some values for you, right? And if you start using it, people start exploiting that.
So instead of following these patterns in testing, we can better follow a developer approach. So it will be more useful for this also.
Like for example, I give you a scenario, right? I want to display a list of items in my page, right? A request comes, it goes to all the layers, and then let's say you're using Hibernate, right? You're familiar with Hibernate. What do? You say item.list, right? You get back the items and show it to the item in the page. In any of these processes, are you creating object of item? No. Do you need set methods? No. So I can create a class with private attributes in it. I don't have to create constructor, I don't have to create set. It just works. Right? Let's say somebody is creating let's assume that somebody is creating an item. Right? This is the reading part. Now somebody, let's say an item administrator or someone who wants to create a new item, right? Will have a form. Nowadays what happens? You have a REST API, you will send it as JSON. Right? Are you creating item there? No. The Jackson would create an item for you, or any other serializer would create an item for you. And you process that into the database. Are you using constructor? No. Are you using setter method? No. So your models will become very clean. And what is the advantage of making like model becoming clean? It becomes more of immutability, right? Once created, you can't change it. Right? Then you are less prone to errors. Did that answer? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So there's actually not a question, but there's actually a library called immutables in Java which gives you an annotation called immutable. If you annotate your models with immutable, it gives you all this. You're talking about builders, right? So it gives you all these build methods in the library itself, and it makes your model itself immutable. Something people can consider.
Yeah.
The immutable has become the fashionable word, so there's a library in every language now for like immutables.
Got it? Ready for dinner? Alright, thank you folks.